Representatives from around the state and country met in Waterville today to talk about the future of the state.
Grow Smart Maine held its annual summit involving keynote speakers, spotlights on communities and organizations, and more. Topics such as housing, renewable energy, and disaster relief were discussed.
They talked about how they've handled these things in the past and how they can be handled better in the future. In between sessions, there also were opportunities for people to talk with folks from all over the state.
We leave plenty of time for conversations because we know getting information and resources from a presenter is important, but so is the conversations that happen during break time and during the walking tours that will come this afternoon. It's about making the connections with other people and with resources.
This year marks the 20th year of Grow Smart Maine. To learn more about the organization, there will be a link on our website.